firstly, I'd like to welcome you all here today to one of our final events of 𝗖𝘁𝗵𝗆 Enterprise Week 2021. And this is our Women in Enterprise event, HR Top Tips for Surviving in a Pandemic. So firstly, I'd like to advise you all that our session today is being recorded and will be available to view after the session on the 𝗖𝘁𝗵𝗆 website. If anyone does have any issues with that, please let us know. However, none of our participants today will be viewed on the video. It will only be our speakers. This is actually our 9th year of Enterprise Week, and we're delighted to see that it continues to grow from strength to strength. There's no denying that this has been an extremely difficult year for all, especially for those within our business community. And although Enterprise Week has to take place in a different format this year, we're delighted that we can continue to bring you a wide range of support from some of the best in the business, and 2 of them we have here today. So a very special word of thanks to Women in Enterprise for organising today's event. Women in Enterprise is a non-profit organisation, and it's a professional network for women in business. The network encourages and empowers women in business into business by providing signposting as well as other business support, including network and workshop and events. Today, I'm delighted to welcome both 𝗖𝘁𝗵𝘆 and 𝗖𝘁𝗵𝗆, who both come with a wealth of experience in the field of HR. So you're very welcome today, ladies, and thank you very much for taking the time out to join us today. Kathy's business experience spans over 25 years in recruitment. She started her career in Edinburgh and then moved back to Northern Ireland to work for one of the largest recruitment agencies in Ireland. Her experience covers all areas of recruitment, and that's everything from IT through to marketing, sales, technical, engineering, accountancy, and also executive level positions, and that's just to name a few. Kathy established her own recruitment business in 2015 and then went on to rebrand as 𝗖𝘁𝗵𝘆 Recruitment in 2020 as her reputation grew. Kathy's actually also co-chair of Women in Enterprise, and today Kathy's going to be talking to us about recruiting through the pandemic. So we'll look forward to hearing from Kathy in today's session. And then we also have, bear with me one second. Kathy's then going to be followed by 𝗖𝘁𝗵𝗆, who's the owner of Consult HR. So Julie is the owner of Consult HR, specialises in providing human resource and employment law support to a wide range of employers throughout Northern Ireland. And apologies if I've already covered this, but Julie's expertise lies within the high risk end of people management, and she provides expert HR advice to SMEs in the areas of redundancy, investigations, dismissals, bullying and harassment, grievances, contracts of employment, 𝗃𝗃, and then more recently, obviously, during the pandemic, that has also included job retention scheme and the furloughing of staff. So today, Julie will be discussing how to overcome the struggles of managing staff during and after the pandemic. So again, a very warm welcome to both Julie and Kathy. It's fantastic to have you both here this morning, and we look forward to hearing from you both. And I just want to let our audience know that we will be facilitating a question and answer session at the end of today's session. But do, as we move through the session, feel free to use your chat box at the bottom of your screen there, or your Q&A box to engage as we go through our session, and then we'll come back to any questions that haven't been covered off at the end of the session. So now, without further ado, to move into today's session, I'm going to pass you over to 𝗖𝘁𝗵𝘆. And Kathy, a very warm welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Danielle. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this event. And I'm going to take you through some tips to succeed in recruiting during and post the pandemic. My name is 𝗖𝘁𝗵𝘆, and I've been working in recruitment for over 25 years. I cover recruitment in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and I'm a niche recruiter and fill professional roles from software engineering to digital marketing. Quite simply, recruitment is putting square pegs in square holes, not square pegs in round holes. I love my job and I'm passionate about getting clients the right fit and getting candidates the right job. Doing this for 25 years, I've seen a lot, heard a lot, and I'm excited to share with you today top tips to succeed in recruiting and or finding or creating a job during and post the pandemic. The top fastest growing hard skills in the 4 nations of the UK in 2020. This slide focuses on Northern Ireland, and I'll give you a comparison to England. Despite it feeling like we've all been locked down and the world has stopped, businesses and enterprise continues. So which skills do you think most employers were looking for and continue to do so? In England, it's been PPE, and in Northern Ireland, it's warehousing. You will notice this slide focuses only on Northern Ireland, not England. The fastest growing skill by far has been PPE, having grown by 82% in England and almost 106% in Scotland and over 200% in Wales, which is clearly reflective of how COVID has affected the economy. Interestingly though, it does not make it into the top 15 in Northern Ireland, where warehousing tops the charts, having grown by almost 72% throughout the year. Skills related to health and social care are prominent in all 4 nations, and outside of health and social care, there are a few prominent skills that reflect the changing nature of retail this year. Warehousing ranked 3rd because of the way people are now buying more online, and Amazon Web Services is up in the top as well as the on-demand cloud computing platform, which provides business scalable and cost-effective growth. In Northern Ireland, what comes up on top are computer programming languages such as React.js, data analysis, and Java. The very significant demand for computing skills in Northern Ireland is especially striking. Along with the 3 mentioned in our list, the top 15 also include Amazon Web Services, AWS, Microsoft Azure, software engineering, Python, data analysis, and automation. Clearly, computing remains in a growth sector. Changes in occupation demand across the UK over the last year. On the flip side, there's been a change in occupation demand landscape. There's been a decline across almost all regions and across almost every occupation over the past 12 months. The biggest decline in employer demand has been in London, and the 3 areas that stand out in Northern Ireland where there's been a positive change are professional occupations, skilled trade occupations, and process plant and machine operatives. Top 5 tips to succeed for employers and candidates. Number 1, appearances count. Companies need to focus on their website or whether they need to rebrand. Candidates need to focus on their CV and their covering letter. And all meetings have now moved. All meetings have moved online. So it's important to focus on what you wear and what's behind you when you're on screen. LinkedIn. Your LinkedIn profile, tidy it up, make sure you have a professional picture and don't leave it blank. Now is the time to update it and fill in any blanks or skills. Social media pages. Have a look at all your social media platforms and could they do with a fresh look or even a rebrand? Companies that are looking to attract candidates in IT need to make sure their website sells their company to candidates to entice them to work for them. Example, why work for us and what do we offer our staff? More companies are now using their websites to attract top talent by using testimonials from current employees or highlighting benefits they may offer as opposed to other companies. Upskilling. Learn new skills. For example, software developers and IT technologists using Coursera and Udacity to get micro-credentials and certificates. These are used for gaps in lagging and specific skills needed for a job. Digital marketing skills, digital marketing certificates and diplomas. Some of these are free, and some of these are also done locally through the Northwest School of Marketing. Nano degrees, to build up to a degree in bits and pieces at your own pace. And use of online meetings, for example, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Google Meets. Make sure to add these to your CV and don't assume companies know you can use them. Digital marketing certificates and diplomas, there is a cost to them, but there's a lot of free events online, so check out the free events if you are on a budget. Agility. Being agile means getting where you want to be faster. Candidates need to be proactive and follow up applications, CVs sent where possible rather than wait. And companies need to recruit faster, especially in IT and technology companies. Candidates in this marketplace are sought after and they don't wait about. These candidates will have outstanding applications and interviews, so speed in recruiting is key. Good people are hard to come by. My old managing director, 𝗵𝗵𝗆 from Grafton Recruitment, once said this, and this has stuck with me since working in recruitment, and it hasn't changed. Companies also need to change expectations when recruiting. For example, qualifications and experience required. They may have to lower or change criteria to get people with the right skill set they need, or look outside the box and focus on attitude for some job, and maybe even offer training to areas or skills they don't have. For an example, an employer once told me, you can train someone on the basics of the job, but not on attitude, as that's ingrained in them. And other examples would be, what does the law allow you to do? For example, I had a client that wanted to interview face-to-face and not online during the pandemic. Number 4, keeping your brand alive. Companies were able to keep their brand alive using their website as a shop front. Companies that had to close, for example, retailers, created online shops and upskilled using e-commerce websites to sell goods online. You'll see some examples of local companies that did this during the pandemic. For example, Joanne from Peacemakers started making visors as PPE equipment for hospitals and care homes, and she utilized her skills, resources, and equipment that she had. Primrose started selling homemade scone kits, you'll all remember them at the start, and doing online demos. And 𝗶𝗵𝗆, who's a makeup artist and has her own salon, started selling products online using an e-commerce website. And these are just some examples of local companies. Other examples of this would have been beauticians, nail bars, skincare specialists, selling products online, as well as creating online content for their audience. Example, YouTube videos for makeup, nails, and skincare products, and tutorials and also charging for this. Companies also use their social media platforms to produce online content from videos or vlogging, and companies use their social media for blogging to get their name out there as well. And even musicians created cloud choirs and produced online content and brought singers and musicians together when their businesses and their income had stopped. Number 5, creating your own job. The pandemic made us all stop and evaluate our jobs. Some people were able to work from home quite easily, and others found this a challenge as they didn't have the office space. Some had to use their kitchen tables and had children at home that were distractions and found it hard to focus. And others decided it was now time to change jobs to do something they always wanted to do, and they never had the courage to do it. The pandemic forced them into this. Maybe they lost their job or were put on furlough, and they now had the time to work on their idea. For example, social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook allowed people opportunities to create businesses and shop fronts. This ranged from selling products online, creating an online shop, to selling their services. For example, financial advice, career coaching, motivational courses, and crafting products. My own daughter is a perfect example of this. She graduated with a degree in chemistry and just before the pandemic had a potential job opportunity at Seagate. Then lockdown hit and everything stopped and was put on hold. She started selling online. She started from eBay. Then she moved to drop shipping, then selling and designing face masks in the early days. And then she moved on to having her own Instagram page called Women Empowerment Corner, where she grew her followers to over 150,000 and finally wrote an e-learning book called Looking to Grow Your Business / Brand on Instagram. She resourced all this herself, and with hard work and persistence, she created her own job. So have a look at your own skills and think, could you create your own job? Finally, just to recap, appearances count. Check out your CV and your cover letter. If you're constantly finding you're not getting interviews, have a look at it, make changes. Your shop front and website, does it need a new look? Is it up to date? Does it need a rebrand? Does your LinkedIn profile have a picture, or can you add in new skills recently learned to it? Upskilling. Do you need to update your skills to secure the job you want? Agility. Remember, the early bird catches the worm, and same applies when applying for jobs or even hiring staff. For candidates, always take the first available interview opportunity, as things can change. And for companies, start interviewing early. Taking into account people have notice periods, don't delay on making offers, and don't make assumptions on candidates. Keeping your brand alive. Use your website to update and refresh your brand. And finally, creating your own job. Look at what skills you have and all the various social media platforms you can use. Finally, I will leave you with this thought. A new job is like a blank book, and you are the author. Thank you for listening this morning. And if you follow me on Twitter at @JobFairyNI, or check out my website, 𝗵𝘵 Recruitment, if you need further information. Thank you all very much for attending on this beautiful summer or spring day, I should say. Thank you.
Okay, folks, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Today I'm going to share with you my 3 top tips in terms of managing staff during COVID and beyond. So the 3 kind of key areas that I'm going to touch on are working from home, and Kathy already has alluded to the hybrid working and the remote working. Also reopening your businesses. Now we've got dates from the executive. So what are the top tips there around the reopening of your business and how to manage that effectively? And then lastly, and probably the more negative side, is the restructuring and potential redundancies that you may face in managing in your business. So first of all, the office and working from home part. So pre-COVID, we did have some remote working, but I suppose the uptake in terms of that was pretty minimal. And in Northern Ireland, there was only 3.8% of working people actually worked from home. Then, of course, 12, 14 months ago, we had the pandemic, and just overnight, basically, that changed where businesses were told you have to close, all your staff need to either work from home or not work at all. And there was no real opportunity for business owners to plan, to make sure, did their employees have the right equipment? Did they have the right internet access? Did they have the right place to work? Did they have the right desk, seating, etc., etc.? So employers really had to think on their feet really quickly and put those provisions in place. They weren't perfect, but they just had, I suppose, to make do and be innovative. And I suppose we've had 12, 14 months of being able to experience now a working from home setting. And I suppose what they're saying is hybrid working is set now to be the new way forward. Pre-COVID, employers would have been fairly reluctant, I would have said, to have their staff working from home. And now they've had that opportunity to experience what it's like. And from the employer and the employee's perspective, both have seen the advantages that can have for your business. And again, CIPD has been doing some research over that period of time to look at What's kind of going to be the trend going forward? What does that look like? And what they've said from the employers that have actually taken part in their survey is 63% of the employers are saying that they intend to introduce hybrid working or some kind of hybrid working going forward. And that's really where employees will work a combination of working from home and also working in the workplace. So it'll be a dual kind of setup there. 48% of the employers plan to introduce or expand on their flexible working. And just looking at the previous slide, where it was only 3.8% of businesses actually did some form of working from home pre-COVID, during COVID, 46.6% of UK residents did some form of working from home. So there's been almost 50% now are actually doing some form of working from home. So a big change there. So why do staff actually like working from home? Well, whenever they were asked that question, interestingly enough, they said less distractions. Now, let's face it, we've had a lot of distractions during COVID with working from home and schools being closed and having to homeschool and look after your children, people who are maybe looking after vulnerable relatives, etc., etc. So we've had a lot of distractions. But that said, a lot of employees have said, in the right conditions, I've had less distractions, and therefore, as a result of that, I've been much more proactive and much more productive working from home. 46% of people who were interviewed and asked this question said that they loved the fact that working from home gave them the opportunity to avoid that commute to work, which then in return gave them more flexibility, they had more time to spend at home, they felt their evenings were longer, and it was just a much easier working environment. However, working from home, there is pitfalls with it as well if it is not managed properly. So from a manager's perspective, you need to make sure that if you basically don't manage it properly, you're going to end up with a disengaged team. They'll be disengaged from their team themselves, they'll be disengaged from their management, and they'll also be disengaged from their employer. They'll feel and become isolated, and that probably is one of the biggest downsides to working from home, is where people, even in the right circumstances, have said that they have felt isolated. And the knock-on effect of that is that it potentially could have an effect on their mental health. And if you look at that and look at employees who are disengaged, they're not really feeling part of the team, their mental health is being affected, then their productivity is also going to decrease, and that's going to have an impact on the business. And the risk with that is that you end up losing valuable team members. So how do you get around that as a manager? How do you manage that? So managers really do have a key role to play in this, and it is completely a new setup and a new skill set for managers to manage. And whenever staff were asked some of the difficulties or how could working from home be improved, in and around 20% said that they didn't really feel their managers engaged with them and gave them proper instruction in terms of their work. So some companies may need to decide or look at the potential of training some of their managers in how to manage teams in a remote setting. Also, whenever people are working from home and the majority of their time is working from home, you need as a manager to create opportunities to talk about non-work related matters. So for example, how do you replace that 5-minute chat on a Monday morning where someone comes in and goes, how was your weekend? How did you get on? What did you get up to? And how do you replace, and I suppose I know from my perspective, whenever I worked in an office, I would have went in and I just needed to talk to a work colleague for 5 minutes because I just put 4 kids out, got them ready for school, highly stressful situation. And I just needed 5 minutes to kind of vent, if you like, to a work colleague. And then I was ready to start my day's work. So you need to create opportunities and ways around those non-work related conversations with your team. And that certainly will help build team relationships as well. So what some companies do is they'll maybe say, okay, 10 o'clock tea break, you have to pick an employee or a work colleague. You go on Teams or you go on Zoom. There's clear instructions that you cannot talk about work related matters. It has to be something outside of work. And then every time you do that, you have to pick a different team member. So you can't just talk to the same team member each time. And I suppose that's one way around it. And employers that have done that have found that the productivity within their team has improved. So there's massive gains from that. Also, from a manager's perspective, you need to adapt the way you communicate tasks to your staff. So micromanaging in a remote working setting just does not work. So things like focus on output, give your employees tasks, work out, so when is that actually going to be completed by, work towards deadlines, and that is a better way to manage staff in a remote setting rather than the alternative. Also, you need to determine what is the best format to have particular meetings. So whilst Zoom and Teams and all those other kind of online platforms are absolutely fantastic for particular types of meetings, there are some meetings that just do not work remotely. So if you're thinking about doing a team meeting and there's going to be some problem solving in it, or there's going to be some brainstorming, online meetings are not the way to go for those kind of meetings. So you know, things like where people are going to feed off each other's energy, where someone will maybe give a suggestion and someone will say, yes, that's right. And what about this? And then they'll add and maybe something else onto their suggestion. Those kind of meetings need to happen face to face, because you kind of lose the flow of the meeting if it's online. If people interrupt or kind of talk over one another, it nearly looks like bad manners and it cuts out and you don't get the full conversation. So, you know, those can kind of be counterproductive if you use the wrong platform. So if you're moving more towards a remote working setup, just make sure that you're using face-to-face meetings for the right types of meetings. And as well, you know, you need to make sure that you're still working on the building the relationships and building the trust within your business. So if lots of staff are working remotely, you need to find some ways to have those conversations. So generally people build relationships and build trust, maybe whenever they're going into a meeting and they're sitting around for 5 minutes waiting for people to join. And it's, how's your kids getting on, getting back into school? Here your son's gone away to university, how's he settling in? That issue that you were talking about last week, did you get it sorted out? Those side conversations are where staff actually build trust and build relationships within the working environment. And you don't really get that in I suppose, a remote working environment. So you need to work around a system or a mechanism to build that into your conversations. So here's an example of what flexible working actually looks like whenever it's done well in your business. So this was a study that was done pre-COVID. It was a study of 250 staff. The conditions and the planning was right. So the business had gone out and said, who would be interested in working from home? These individuals had put their hand up and said, yes, I would love to work from home. They got the right IT equipment in place. They made sure that people had the right internet connection. They had the right setup. And so all the provisions were pre-planned, unlike COVID, where it was literally overnight, go home and just make do with what you've got. In the right setting and the right setup, the productivity within that business increased by 20%. That's massive. That is a massive gain for the employer. Their sick leave also reduced, and the time off, the amount of time off that individuals were requesting from work reduced dramatically as well. Now, interestingly, what they did report was the one negative thing they did report was increased level of feeling isolated when they were working from home. So even in the right conditions and the right setup, they still felt a little isolated. And that, I suppose, brings me back to where you need to make sure that you have those opportunities for face-to-face meetings, and that your staff are talking to other team members regularly to keep that teamwork and ethos alive within the business. But the one thing I suppose to remember is everybody works differently. Working from home isn't for everybody. And I'm currently working with a client at the minute, and we're looking at a very flexible approach where we're allowing the staff to choose. So they choose if they want to work from home, or they choose if they want to work in the office. There is some guidelines around that, obviously, but you know, it allows individuals to adapt their working environment to how they feel they work best. So reopening your business. So we know now we have dates from the executive, great. So today hairdressers opening, next week will be retail and the hospitality sector. But there's a bit of planning that needs to be done in terms of that. And how do you plan for your staffing levels for your reopening? How do you strike the balance to make sure that you have the right number of staff returning at the right time? And even though we have dates, it's still going to be a phased reopening for businesses. And businesses are still going to have to manage the restrictions, i.e. the social distancing, etc., which is going to have implications for you managing your business. So how do you know what staff you need to bring back? How do you make those decisions? So you need to look, I suppose, at what is your business going to look like whenever you open up? What is the demand going to be? What is the demand going to look like? Will your staff be available? So what I'm finding is that lots of staff have been put on furlough. They've gone out and sought secondary employment, which is perfectly fine and is within the guidelines of the furlough that you can do that. But they've maybe had an opportunity to experience a different type of job that they would have done pre-COVID. And they maybe have decided, I'm not going to return to my employer, but they haven't let you know that yet. So, you need to work out, is all of your staff going to be available, or are they not? What is their thought process around that? And has your business changed? Has it evolved during COVID? And Kathy mentioned there about retail businesses having to move more online. And certainly I had a client who had a retail business. The business closed. The executive said, close your doors. You can't do click and collect. And they had set up, I suppose, a bit of an online presence, but it wasn't significant. And they put a lot of time and effort into growing their online presence. And as a result of that, their business has boomed. But also what has actually happened within the business is they've had to recruit a different type of skill set. So they've someone working on their website, they've someone working on their online presence, on their social media channels, they've someone working in warehousing. So they've recruited a lot of different staff members and skill set that they wouldn't have had pre-COVID. Now, whenever they reopen, what's their business going to look like? They're not going to need the same number of staff in the shop that they would have required before. So you need also to take that into account. How has your business changed during COVID and during your closure? And what's it going to look like whenever you reopen? So how do you manage that? How do you get around it? What are the top tips? And really what you need to do is plan ahead. So contact your staff before you reopen and find out, what are your thought processes? Are you going to return? We're expecting to reopen on date X. Are you planning to return to work? Staff your business in accordance to what your expected demands are. So what are you thinking of doing? Are you planning on bringing everybody back, but maybe on a flexi furlough scheme? So everybody will get a certain amount of hours, and then the balance of the hours will be then made up by furlough. Or are you planning to bring a core number of staff back, have them working all of the hours, and then as a result of that, as things open up more, then you'll bring the rest of your staff back gradually on a gradual process. So have a think about how you're best going to manage that. And obviously there will be an element of flexibility required from your staff. So if you're in hospitality and you're reopening your doors and it's only going to be an outside facility that you'll be able to open next Friday, you may decide, our waiting staff previously we would have designated staff on the bar, we would have designated staff doing food, but actually because of social distancing and because of the restricted numbers that we can cater for, we're actually going to get our staff that come back to cover both the bar and both the waiting, so they'll have to do both. So if that's the case, you need to explain to your staff, that's what we're planning to do, that is our expectations of you, your role will change slightly. So they're on board and they know exactly what the expectations are of them whenever they return. Also consider a mini induction. So, your staff are going to be a bit rusty. They've been off for 3 months at least, if not longer. So to make sure that they're hitting the ground running, do a mini induction program with them, cover the COVID procedures with them, make sure they understand what those processes are going to be whenever your doors open. And also make sure that you communicate with all staff. So don't forget about the non-returners. So if you're deciding to only bring back a core number of staff now at the start of your reopening, make sure that you communicate with everybody, not just those that are returning. So if, don't have staff sitting at home thinking, well, I know hospitality is opening next weekend, but my employer hasn't been in touch with me and I don't know if I'm due back next weekend or if it's going to be further on down the line. So make sure that you do that communication with the staff. I had a client a couple of weeks ago who'd come to me and said, look, we don't have any dates for the opening of the hospitality sector, but I feel that I need to start planning. So what we did was we wrote out to all the staff and said, look, we're really keen, can't wait to reopen our doors, but we haven't any dates from the executive and we'll be in touch with you as soon as we have those dates. However, we know, and he did know, that some staff had gone and got employment elsewhere. So he wrote to his staff and said, you may have gained employment elsewhere. We will let you know as soon as we're reopening. Can you let me know what your intentions are? Are you intending to come back and work with us, or are you not? And please reply. And they did. So essentially, he knew very early days what staff he was working with, what staff were returning, what roles he had and what roles he needed to fill. And so he has his route all set out for next weekend. He's bringing a staff in for an induction this week. So he'll be ready to go with an outdoor facility as of next week. And also, I was talking to someone in hospitality yesterday who was saying that there is a shortage of about 2,500 jobs to be filled in the hospitality sector, which is pretty good, I suppose, from an employment perspective. So just moving on to the final point, which is on restructuring and redundancy, as I talked about, probably the more negative part of the presentation. And I suppose the reason why I wanted to talk about this area is NSERA will publish stats every quarter, and the stats that they issued in January 2021 really won't have changed very much from then to now. And in January 2021, we had about 95,000 people in Northern Ireland still on furlough. That's massive. That is a massive number. So we ultimately have 95,000 people who we now need to either get back into employment with the reopening of our economy, or else, unfortunately, we're going to be looking at redundancies. In 2020, 11,000 redundancies were proposed, and just over 4,500 redundancies were actually made. And the couple of economist webinars that I've been on have anticipated that our unemployment levels are going to increase probably by another 3 to 4%. And certainly from my perspective, last year we would have been advising clients on a weekly basis, daily basis, on redundancies. Employers were, their businesses were suffering. They had too many staff. Staff is a significant overhead for businesses, and they needed to cut costs. And as a result of that, we were working through multiple redundancies. There was also a concern at that time. Furlough was coming to an end. The announcement at that time was furlough is going to finish in November, and employers were saying, what am I going to do with these staff after November? I need to do something. An announcement was made very late in November, just I think the day or so after the furlough scheme was due to end, to say we're extending the furlough scheme. And almost overnight, any proposed redundancies basically stopped. So certainly from my perspective, the furlough scheme has saved a lot of jobs, but now come June, July time, employers will be required to contribute more to the furlough scheme, and that's going to be an additional cost. And they're also going to be looking at their businesses now as their doors reopen and looking at their staff and saying, what staff do I actually need? What jobs do I need to fill now to support my business going forward? I suppose one of the difficulties with lots of employers is they don't actually know the procedure to follow in terms of redundancy, and they take the wrong approach, and they take the Alan Sugar approach, and they just identify the individual. They don't follow any steps, and they just say to them, thanks very much, but I'm letting you go. And that has significant risks for the employer. Now, we are living in a very litigious world here. And whenever I did a similar presentation, or I did a presentation this time last year for Enterprise Week, the stats at that time was 30%. There was a 30% rise in tribunal claims, which is the cases that employees take against employers where they believe or feel that they've been treated inappropriately. Now, 30% is pretty significant, but that is nothing compared to 2020. Where claims have actually skyrocketed, so much so that if an employee lodges a case now against an employer, it'll be 2023 before the case is likely to be heard in a tribunal. And that's, I suppose, a combination of things: the number of redundancies that have been made, and individuals are challenging their employers and suing them, I suppose. And on the other hand, our tribunal offices have been closed for a considerable period of time due to COVID, and that their offices are not COVID friendly. So I suppose that's a big burden to be carrying, where you're not going to get to the end of that case until 2023, whenever you're still trying to manage and run your business. So in a situation where an employee decides that they're going to take a case against you, you run the risk of having to pay them compensation if it is found that the decision was unfair. You run the risk of having to pay them compensation for them losing their job. It'll also cost you legal costs. To defend a case now is on around £12,000 to £15,000. And also, it's probably one of the most stressful scenarios you'll ever find yourself in, where you're legally cross-examined by a team of barristers trying to defend your decision. And it is fairly stressful. So what I would say to you is procedure, procedure, procedure. You need to make sure that you get your procedure right, that you get the right advice. And it's really about looking at, what are the rules? What does your business look like now? What is your business going to look like in the future? Compare that to the staff that you've got. Do the two marry up, or do you find, or have you found, the like of the retail scenario that I gave? Is it a case your business has changed quite significantly, or maybe the demand has reduced to a stage where you have too many staff in your business for the business that you're running, and as a result of that, you need to reduce your headcount? So if that is the case, then you need to make sure that you have a fair selection process that will stand up to scrutiny in a tribunal. A redundancy is still deemed to be a dismissal, so you must follow the 3-step dismissal procedure, which is set out in law. If you don't follow that, the decision will be automatically unfair, and the individual can also ask or request that they get an uplift in terms of their compensation, which can be up to an additional 50% on the original compensation that they are awarded. And the other thing is that you really want to protect your company's reputation. So all tribunal cases are public. And I'm sure you're familiar with the 𝗖𝘁𝗵𝗆 case. That was, or then became known more commonly as the cake case. And just to give you a bit of an idea, this case was run, the individual who raised the case against 𝗖𝘁𝗵𝗆s, the compensation was £500. But the legal costs in terms of running that case from both the employer side and the employee side, £500,000 of legal costs it costs. So it is quite an expensive, it is a very expensive process. So what I would say to you is, make sure that you get your procedure right. So I had an employer that we had a redundancy situation. We brought the individual in, we followed the process. It was a restructuring within the finance department, and we were merging two roles together. We did the proper due diligence. We did the, created the job description of what the job was going to look like. We consulted with the staff. We invited them to the meeting. We followed the 3-step dismissal procedure. And as an additional, I suppose, protection, what we did was we offered the individual an enhanced payment, and they signed an agreement not to take a case against the employer going forward. And we also made sure that the employer had legal expenses insurance in place in the event that the employee was going to take a case and we weren't going to reach an agreement. So what I would say to any employers listening into this, the one golden nugget out of today would be, or two golden nuggets maybe, is first of all, make sure you get the right advice. And secondly, check your insurance policy and make sure that you have legal expenses in place, because if you follow the proper procedures and you have a case that you can defend, if you've got legal expenses insurance, then your legal expenses will then come in at that point in time and cover any legal costs. So the 12 to 15% of legal costs that I talked about previously would be taken over by your insurance company, and they would bring a solicitor on board to take care of that. So hopefully that has been of some benefit. Hopefully you've got a couple of top tips out there that have been of benefit that you can implement in your business. I will post quite often, I suppose, top tips or useful information on my social media channels. So I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. If you have any queries or questions and you want to contact me, that's my email address and my phone number. And also you can go onto the website where I have some, I suppose, useful information that you can download as well. So I'm going to hand you back to Danielle, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you to both Julie and Kathy. Excellent presentations and advice from you both today. So thank you very much. It's definitely given me some food for thought, and I'm sure it has our participants in today's session as well. I'd also like to apologise for the sound interruption that we had at the start of the session, but it seemed to work fine then once we got into things. So apologies with regards to that. If anyone does have any questions, now's the time to ask them. So you can pop your questions into the chat box. If you just look at the bottom of your screen there, you'll have a chat and a Q&A box. So you can put questions or comments into either of those. But we do have a few questions that have come in here. So I'm just going to start with those, and any others, feel free to put them into the box. So ladies, thank you very much. The first question is for Julie. So Julie, during a phased opening of your business, how do you select who returns first in this instance?
Okay, so I suppose it goes back to what I had said previously in terms of identifying how you want your business to reopen. Is it going to be a case of a flexi furlough approach for everybody, so everybody returns? That's the easy one. You don't actually have to make a selection there. So just make sure that you communicate with your staff what your expectations are, what shifts that they're going to be following, what is the number of hours they're going to be working, and how many hours they're going to be in flexi furlough. What I would say in that situation is, if you're using the flexi furlough scheme, as people will know, the HMRC have said you must have a written agreement in place. So I mean, they are definitely going to do checks, and they have been doing checks to make sure that employers have the right processes in place. And they could go as far as asking you for your furlough agreements. So make sure that you have those furlough agreements in place. Some people have had to do extended letters because they maybe put a furlough letter in place for the first period of furlough, and then they maybe haven't renewed them. So just make sure that all that kind of paperwork is in place. Yeah. If you're maybe looking at bringing back a core number of your staff, so you're not considering bringing everybody back at the one time. So if you take a hospitality sector, for example, say you had 10 chefs and you're saying, right, we want 2 or 3 chefs back, and we've got 50 waiting staff, but we only need 10 waiting staff back as our core. Then what you could do is drop some criteria to say, well, this is a skill set that we actually need to open our doors, and assess your 10 chefs against that skill set, and then have a skill set for your waiting staff and assess your 50 waiting staff against that skill set. And then those that have scored the highest are the people that then come back off furlough first. So that's probably the best way to kind of demonstrate how you would do that. So you're bringing people back based on their skill set and what your business needs are.
Great, Julie, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Our next question is for Kathy. So Kathy, as Julie mentioned in her presentation, 63% of businesses are now looking to introduce hybrid stroke working from home. What's your thoughts on this, especially from a recruitment perspective?
Well, obviously, when things reopen, there's certain businesses that do need their staff back on the premises, but then there's some occupations and some companies that do want their staff back in the office because they do miss the face-to-face. One perfect example would be like tech companies. Now, most of the tech companies and finance companies can work from home because of the nature of their jobs. However, the people that probably miss most disadvantaged have been graduates because, I mean, I have one company in particular, one tech company, and they would have taken quite a lot of graduates. However, because of working from home, those graduates need mentored. And as Julie said earlier in her presentation, where you go in and you sit and have a chat or go to somebody's desk and ask, they can't do that anymore. So they're sitting at home and they might have to wait till somebody's out of a meeting or make a phone call to ask a question. So it's really restricted them. So they have been disadvantaged. So there will definitely be hybrid working patterns, you know, moving forward. So it'll not be totally all working from home, but I think companies, as Julie said, need to offer that flexibility for staff. And that's going to have an effect on recruiting staff as well. Because, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people that have said, I can't wait to get back to the office. Now, jobs can be done at home, and then you'll have people saying, I'm working on the kitchen table and I never switch off. I mean, I know some people in particular who are literally working solid constantly and they've got Zoom fatigue and they just can't switch off. So moving forward, there is definitely going to be that hybrid working pattern.
Yeah, and that actually sparks a question too, Kathy. I'd like to hear both your thoughts on this. So obviously, you know, Julie talked quite a lot about how staff engagement is very important. And as you're mentioning there, Kathy, the Zoom fatigue and all the rest. Would you have any tips on how managers can identify staff members that are potentially disengaged or, you know, more so than the rest of the team? Is there any tips for how they can identify those individuals in terms of addressing those issues?
Probably more the communication, as Julie had said earlier, about, you know, managers being more engaged with their employees, whether they're having brainstorming sessions or, you know, breakout rooms or things like that, where they are going to maybe not talk about work or maybe, you know, ask questions. It's back to how they ask questions, you know, questioning technique and probably the skills in the manager. You know, can they spot that? I mean, obviously mental health, and people, you know, keep talking about, you know, working from home and isolation and mental health. Yes, it is a massive thing. And if you know your staff well and there's just, you know, patterns in their behavior, things like that there. So I think it's back to the communication and changing the way they work and communicate.
Yeah, I would agree. Just again, reinforcing what you said there, Kathy, it is about managers will know their team and know their individual team members. So they should be able to spot, you know, if they're maybe acting in a particular way. And I suppose those non-work related conversations would hopefully tease out if there is something there that is bothering that individual, you know, because that's generally where you would get that from, is those non-work related conversations. So yeah, just reinforcing, I suppose, there what Kathy has talked about, the engagement is critical and getting to know your team and then looking for those signs.
Brilliant. Thank you both, ladies. I don't think we have any other questions coming through there at the minute. So look, I think, you know, session's due to close now at 12 anyway. So I'd like to now take the opportunity to say a huge thank you to our speakers today and also to Women in Enterprise for organising today's event, and to you, our audience. I hope you got something from today's session. If anyone would like more information about Women in Enterprise or any of their member benefits, then you can visit www.womeninenterprise.biz for further information there. As you may be aware, Derry City and Strabane District Council are still available and working hard to deliver a range of services to our local businesses and startups as they resume business as usual during these unprecedented times. So if you would like to speak to a member of our team, please contact me directly. My email address is danielle.mcnally, McNally, @derrystrabane.com. And all that remains for me to say is that I hope you enjoyed the session today and wish you every success in the future. And we have a few comments coming in there on the chat now saying, very well done, ladies, very informative, and big thank you to you both. So thanks to everybody for today's session. It was great to see you all.
Thanks very much,
you.
folks. Have a great
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.